America's on the brink of economic collapse. People are out of work, and we're spending money faster than we can take it in. Liberal policies are going to bankrupt this country. The problem is, Democrats will tax your businesses to death, killing jobs and costing people wages, forcing people to dip into their retirement and savings to be able to make ends meet. It's the exact opposite of what we need right now. The way forward is to stay focused on small business, keep taxes low across the board, get rid of job-killing regulations and red tape, promote investment. That's how we empower people to dream big. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat. It doesn't matter if you're an independent. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican. Now is the time to reinvest in America through conservative leadership. What we need is the right approach. I'm Chris Wright, candidate for Congress in Florida's 9th District, and I approve this message.
Am I still muted?
Yeah, you're good.
All right, welcome everyone. I see we've got some new faces and some old stalwarts with us this evening. This is our fourth in every week, every Wednesday night podcast, ZoomCast with our candidate for Congress, Chris Wright. We avoided doing the common 30-second TV ad air that we've got prepped and ready to go. We'll add that on when we post it on YouTube. Tonight, man, again, we've got so much to talk about and go over and ask the congressman his viewpoint or how he would react to things if he were a sitting congressman as he is now.
Sorry, you can keep using congressman.
Yeah.
We'll be optimistic.
The news cycle just keeps pressing on faster than we can keep up with it. And I'm sure the world feels that way too, that everybody can just take a collective deep breath as we work through issues that have been long-standing in the United States, issues that have been recent additions, and issues that need to be talked about and resolved going forward. So first off, some good news. Tonight we got an email that said Governor DeSantis has officially let Florida into phase 2.
Yeah, phase 2. So, I mean, really all that amounts to is people being able to get an additional 25% on their occupancy standards. So restaurants and places of public accommodation, instead of being at 25, can be at 50%. So I know certainly that's moving in the right direction, but I know there are still a lot of restaurant owners and other places that are itching to just open back up, mostly because of the financial crunch that they're still feeling. I had an opportunity to actually speak with a restaurant owner a few days ago. He owns a wing place down off of 192, and I straight asked him, "Is like, with the current occupancy standard, are you able to turn a profit?" He said, "No, we're barely breaking even, and that's even after cutting as many extras as they could cut." So if we're going to get people really back to work, if we're really going to see the economy come back to where it should be, we just need to open up. We need to let business owners be intelligent about how they're going about conducting their business, and let them figure out how to get back to normal, how they can start turning a profit for these businesses. We're not going to get into that transition third quarter without taking that step. So I'm pleased that Florida is at least moving in the right direction, but I feel like we need to step on the gas and let's get this thing rolling.
Yeah, I think DeSantis is letting us go into phase 2. I'm wondering how it'll be implemented locally.
Yeah.
We've got, you've got several mayors that are still maybe not on DeSantis's team and will delay, or I don't know if there's an aspect of that you'd like to cover.
Well, the new executive order, it specifically says that it preempts the previous orders, but it doesn't mention anything about counties and local government, at least not for the majority of the state. It does give a little bit of a carve out for South Florida, Miami-Dade, Broward counties, because they're a little more behind the curve when it comes to watching things level out. So the governor did pitch them a little bit more authority to manage their rate of opening up their restaurants and other businesses. But for the rest of the state, we're in phase 2, and it'd be interesting to see if local mayors or county commissions try to curtail people being able to make that leap, that progress into phase 2. But hopefully that's not going to happen. Certainly I'm not advocating for that. I just want to see us skip all that and go right to open.
So a lot of the business owners, as they begin to open, I was in a conversation this morning with a local banker, and she was talking about implementation of the PPE and how some of these loans that were made are now coming back, that they were made in error, and they're going back and asking for the money back, or
Yeah.
are there going to be non-forgiven pieces of the puzzle, and how complicated that was getting. And let's go over a little bit of the CARES Act. And now, after it was certainly rushed through Congress, we'll talk about that. But let's talk about implementation and what we learned.
So I know I mentioned on an earlier podcast, and I told a story about a lady that I knew that I actually represented. And she had taken money from the Obama stimulus package. It was a medical grant that she had received for researching a new topical patch to help people get off opioids. Well, obviously, whenever you take grant money, it's going to come with certain restrictions. And those restrictions were about how that money could be spent. And the IRS ended up coming back a few years after she had spent the money and tried to recapture that money because they said that it wasn't spent in the way that the statute had intended the money to be spent. She, of course, disagreed, which was the basis for the audit that she ended up having to go through. But the moral of the story was, if you take government money, there's going to be strings attached, and you're opening yourself up to the possibility that the IRS or other agencies are going to take a deep dive into your business and its finances, trying to figure out where that money went. So relating that now to the CARES Act, and we're seeing all these litany of stories coming out about how, big businesses are getting, billions of dollars, and people who otherwise don't need care money are getting money. And the comment was, well, yeah, because you pass the package through in like a week, right? So normally when you put a bill on into the House, it takes months for it to get through committee. Then it takes months to get to the floor after more debate, right? And then if it passes the House, it moves to the Senate and it gets back into committee. And then the Senate votes on it, and it may end up getting sent back to the House to get amended again. So, that's why it takes years to get some of that stuff passed. But when you have something that's important as like the CARES Act and people needing that immediate relief, they didn't have time to vet all of these different what ifs and what about this group and what happens if this happens and are we going to recapture that money? None of that stuff was worked out. They shoved this thing through Congress in a week and a half. I mean, yeah, what did you expect? There's going to be money that's going to get funneled out to people who didn't necessarily need it, but that was the price that we paid for the expediency of the bill.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. Everybody was clamoring for it. Everybody says the government needs to do something, need to do something quick. They did something quick, and now they're like, wait a minute. We didn't realize the floodgates were entirely open, and corporatist America kind of absorbed more of it than was ever intended.
But that's really a commentary on government efficiency, right? You can either have it done well or you can have it done fast. You don't get both when it comes to government, right? So if you're saying I need a check and I need it yesterday, okay, but you're going to pay a substantially higher principal on that money than you otherwise would if you let it work through the process, because you don't have things like big multi-billion-dollar corporations who don't need the money getting big fat checks that now you're going to have to try to pay people to go recapture. I mean, it's going to take years to clean it up. And hopefully the folks who ended up spending this money and are being told that they have to repay it now will have the wherewithal to do that. But that's only going to happen if we let them reopen their business, right? Otherwise, what you're going to see is people clamoring to file bankruptcy.
Correct. So the Congress and Senate has yet another package coming. Are they going to take their time with this one?
If Mitch McConnell has his way, that's exactly what's going to happen. I mean, he's come out publicly many times saying we need to see how the CARES Act works itself out. Did it really accomplish its intended purpose? Did the people who received the money really need the money? Are there ways that we can better target the folks that need additional help? Does it really need to be another $3 trillion, or can it be a lesser amount? So I think if Mitch McConnell has his way, the second relief bill is probably going to be sitting on his desk until we see most of the CARES Act money having been dispersed, and then we actually start to get some feedback from these different agencies and business leaders about how that money was used and whether or not it was really beneficial for them. And how we can better improve that process. So I think they're learning from the first time around, saying like you can have it fast or you can have it efficient. You don't get both, right?
I agree. The impact of the debt, our national debt going up. I mean, I can see we might have another 100 years epidemic come around before the first one is paid off entirely. So
I know the president's been on record. I don't know if it was months ago. That must have been a couple months ago. He did a press release, and he was basically laying out some of the priorities that he wants to tackle for his next term. And one was really addressing the debt issue. He openly admitted that he decided that his priority needed to be to rebuild the military and focus on infrastructure. And so he spent a lot of money in his proposed budgets getting those things back to where they needed to be. But having done that, it's time to turn our focus into helping us get our debt and our budget back under control. Because if we keep kicking the can down the road, I mean, it's going to get to the point where we're literally going to have to sell the country to China.
So the only way that anyone's ever been able to balance a budget is with a robust economy.
Yes.
And so it's all about the economy again. And Trump built it the first time around.
Yep.
I'd love to see the second time around.
We've got to see growth numbers in the 5 to 7%. Now, the last time GDP hit 7% was when Ronald Reagan was in office, right? We haven't seen growth like that since the Reagan years. But Trump was coming pretty close, and I think he might have made it if this thing hadn't hit us and we had to close the economy down. We were well on our way to having a 6 or 7% GDP economy. But a 6 or 7% GDP economy means we actually have the liquidity to be able to start paying down some of the debt that we've got outstanding, at the very least tackling the deficiency in our yearly budget, right? But if you really want to start to reverse this trends, not only do we have to get a surplus in our budget, but we have to not spend the surplus, right? We got to take that surplus and we got to start paying people off so that other countries don't end up owning us.
Well, I tell you what, it's the ebb and flow of the economy. You get a good economy, you build it. You get a tax and spend Democrat in the office, and the programs suddenly expand again.
Yeah, so Bill Clinton, same thing. He inherited a surplus in the budget, and then you watch social programs explode, and then that surplus disappeared. So for the first time in decades, we had an opportunity to actually start making progress on paying down our national debt, and instead we squandered it on expanding social programs. So a lesson to be taken from that experience, and if we get back to the point where we've got surpluses in our budget, we need to throw it at our debt.
So let's transition now to the economic impact that we're seeing from the turmoil that's going on in the United States right now. We'll get into the riots and the reasonings a little bit, but let's talk about small business. It's their economy, it's their businesses. They're being hurt. They're being burned out in many cases. What's the site? Where can this CARES Act or the HEROES Act help these people out?
Yeah, so I guess the real question is whether or not you can attribute what's going on with the civil unrest and link it somehow with the COVID epidemic. So it has been suggested by some that if the economy were open and people were heading to work every morning instead of sitting at home watching their social media feeds, that perhaps we would have seen this play out differently. And maybe instead of looting and burning, we would have just seen people out trying to spread a message. So if people can manage to make that, I think it's kind of a stretch myself, but if you can manage to make the leap and say, listen, this wouldn't have been nearly as bad if people weren't home because of COVID, maybe you could apply some of those CARES Act funds to helping those businesses rebuild. Again, I think that's kind of a stretch. I don't know if that's going to be permitted under the statute. Certainly that's something that the legislature could take up if we're ready to move forward on something like a HEROES Act. Maybe the legislature could recognize that those things could be linked and provide a little bit of relief for business owners there. And it's not business owners' fault that all of this erupted. So, but they're being penalized by it because now their places of business are being destroyed.
Yeah. So much of my understanding of the CARES Act also goes down to the county level. So I've heard county level implementation differences from Polk to Osceola to Orange, 3 completely different outlooks and methodologies for dispersing the funds to their residents.
Yeah. So Orange and Polk are actually looking a little bit better than Osceola. Osceola is having to go back and forth with the state trying to get some of the CARES Act money. Apparently, the size of the county was not such that they just got an immediate disbursement of funds from the federal aid package. Polk County, because it's huge, made that threshold. And obviously Orange County, who's got like 2 million residents or something, they made the cut. But Orange County, if I remember my numbers right, was taking 60% of their 224 million, something like that, and giving it to businesses and residents. So about 30% is going to help stimulate business, 30% is going to direct residential relief. So it'd be like rent relief funds, grocery funds, that kind of stuff. So that's Orange County. Polk County took 70 million of their 125 million and divided it up between businesses and direct residential assistance. So we'll see what happens with Osceola when they finally manage to get some money in and how they're going to divide that up. But I know they're actively working with the legislature in Tallahassee to try to make that happen.
Well, that is certainly a big part of your constituency.
Yes.
That you are voting, that you are buying for their vote. So we are definitely going to.
But again, that comes back to what happens when you pass legislation quickly and you don't have time to send it through committee, because if you'd had time to get it through committee, Osceola literally could have sent somebody to the congressional office and said, what about us? You're proposing this bill. It's got all this money in it. Your numbers, the threshold numbers for the population count of the county would exclude us from being able to get access to those funds. How are you going to help the people in my county? But that conversation never took place because nobody had a chance to digest what was in that 1,800-page relief bill that they pushed through in like a week, right? So that's one of those things like, okay, well, you can have it quick or you can have it done right. And you don't get both.
Shades of Obamacare giving me nightmares.
Yeah.
Push it through, and then we'll find out what's inside, what's in the bill.
Right. We'll read it after we pass it, right?
Yeah. So let's talk. Rewind back to the economic impact of some of the riots. Certainly, businesses are shutting down, whether there was a riot in their area or not. I know here in our local area, businesses were shutting early for fear of unrest in the streets. And many of the protests were absolutely warranted, and many of the protests are very peaceful. But there is an agitator element amongst them, and opportunity is being taken, and the businesses are being let down.
Yeah.
They're not even going to be able to file for insurance. I found that out this morning. That I didn't understand why. I thought, well, I have homeowners insurance. If someone burns my house down, it's hopefully I'm not in there, but I'm going to get my insurance.
Yeah, businesses were shutting down just on the threat of protests coming to their area. Not even like people started showing up and like, all right, we're going to close down real quick and try to prevent any kind of property loss. But if there was even like a whisper on social media that like, hey, we're organizing in this area, well, businesses are closing up shop. So the second and third order effects of what's going on are really what are of interest to me, because the obvious impact is businesses are closing, they can't conduct business, they lose income, right? So what happens though when the business gets firebombed or it gets looted? Okay, well, let's take a look at that process for a second. Now you're talking about having to try to itemize your damages, filing insurance claims. That's even assuming you're covered for that kind of a loss, having to come up with a deductible for that policy when you've been out of work for the last 2.5 months. And then having to stay closed while your establishment is rebuilt over the next 6 to 12 months, not to mention all of the people that instead of being furloughed for the virus are now being laid off because there is no immediate chance of that business reopening. That literally just went up in smoke, right? So, I mean, you want to look at the second and third order effects. It's not just people are walking down the street and throwing bricks through windows, which can be replaced. No, you are literally destroying not only the business owner's livelihood, but everybody that worked there is now literally out of a job. So instead of the hope that they had that they are getting back to work, even at 25 or 50% capacity, they are now out of a job. They're not out of a job. And guess who's picking up the tab for that? The rest of us, right? Insurance premiums are going to go up. We're going to have to keep paying the unemployment claims because somebody who otherwise had a job just was denied a job, or the job was taken from them. So all of those financial burdens are now being shifted to the rest of us to have to pick up the slack on that.
This is certainly, in some respects, a no-win situation for leadership in charge, Trump or the Democrats on either side. You have to put down the riots.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put down the looting. You don't want to put down protesters.
Yeah, legitimate speech. Legitimate speech is something you always have to protect, right? But that's not what we've been seeing for the last week.
Certainly not as it goes into the evening, the nights.
Yeah.
I've been glad to see curfews put back in place. There's really no legitimate protesting going on after 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Now you're just out there looking for something. And I think they found it. There's been many instances that I've been very interested in, and I'm wondering if people are paying attention at the general attorney level, that there's pallets of bricks being placed, and I can tell that there's an element of organization behind some of this that are taking advantage of these protests that are legitimate.
Yeah, we'll be watching real close to see how that shakes out. I've seen the same articles that you've been reading, that there are indications that perhaps there's something going on in the background there. I appreciate that our officials are going to be investigating that and looking into it. And certainly if we can make a solid connection between these people instigating acts of looting and theft and even assault. I think one guy died.
Many people have died, yeah.
I read an article that there was a business owner that literally got beaten with 2x4s because he was trying to keep people from breaking up his business. I mean, we're talking about major crimes in here. Now, I'll grant you that with the number of people that are out on the streets at the moment and the number of people who are getting injured are disproportionate. So not everybody out on the streets is going out with 2x4s and beating people.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's happening is disturbing.
There was an off-duty black security guard cop. He was security guarding for this company at night. He got shot. They ran away with a couple TVs. The video is of the people coming up, and they're just incredulous about it. They're like, this man just lost his life live on camera almost, so that people could run away with a TV.
Yeah, it's so sad. I mean, is the price of a life worth a TV?
That's what he was saying. It was disheartening. It was just unbelievable, and it takes away from the message of what started this whole thing.
You know, obviously people getting shot and killed, that stuff's a tragedy. But to lump on top of that the fact that the rest of us who are staying at home watching this are now being desensitized to what's going on, right? So normally when you've got a horde of people who are approaching downtown, they have a message, people, they listen. They say, hey, what's going on? You know, what is it that has motivated these people to come out of their houses, congregate in an area to hear their message? Well, if that message deteriorates into violence and looting and assault and even murder, well, the rest of us are just going to tune out whatever message that you've got to convey, right? Because now it's not about the message anymore. Now it's about criminality. And so everybody who's out on the streets is now going to be viewed as a criminal, whether they were out there doing criminal things or not, right? So another tragedy to lob on top of everything else is that legitimate messages are being stymied because the rest of us are no longer paying attention to that part. All we're focused on is the criminality of it. And it does everybody a disservice, because the next time maybe I have something to say or another group has something to say and we go downtown, the only thing that's going to be on people's minds is who's going to start throwing bricks first.
So not to segue into something I thought of here, and the protesters are out there. Let's talk about the legal protesters. The protesters are out there marching in the streets, tens of thousands strong, not being violent, not being burning anything down, but they are certainly not social distancing.
Yeah. No, they're not. But the part that I think is interesting is that when you watch the video clips on social media of the people that are actually having positive interactions with law enforcement and their local leaders, it takes place during the day, right? It's always sunny outside. And it's a picnic that's going on, or the police are marching with the crowd to show support. It's always taking place during the day. But every time somebody gets beaten or murdered or robbed or looted, it's always at night. And so the question about whether or not curfews are an effective deterrent against, nighttime criminality, I mean, just look at the videos on social media. You tell me. And by the way, I love watching the clips from people who are interacting during the day, because it really shows that, the narrative that it's us versus them, it's a false narrative. It's a false narrative. You're talking about the extreme minority of instances that's lighting a powder keg for the entire country. And I think that's largely driven by liberal media. I know I can speak for myself, and I hope I can speak for all conservatives when I say that, these racial charged issues, it's not systemic. I don't believe that. I haven't heard any conservative being out like, oh yeah, Black lives don't matter. I've not heard anybody say that. So for them to be out and saying, well, this entire segment, this systemic problem that society is pushing, that they're hunting people of a particular race, it's just not true. It's not true. Now, can I say that there's never been an instance where somebody hasn't done something and it's been racially motivated? Of course not. We live in a free society. People are going to do stupid stuff, right? But does that make it a systemic problem? I don't think so. So I think the message needs to be, listen, I don't care, what your ethnic background is. I don't care what your nationality is. What I care about is how you act and how you treat other people. And if you can do those two things, you've got my respect. Right. And I think if that's the message that we put out to the general population, and that's what starts to filter around people, maybe we can start to see people's attitudes change for the better.
I think we've seen the turn. I think the police are out. I think they are beginning to have an understanding. I know that based on the worldwide, this protesting is no longer contained in the United States.
Yeah.
There's protests
in London. I saw the one in London. Yeah.
Australia, everywhere. You bring this much attention to an issue, and it's bound to have lasting impact and good impact. There does need to be something, and everyone needs to learn to love more, to be more trusting, and to root out, the ones that are not going to be that way. I've got a lot of personal opinions about this, but I'm going to defer to the candidate. Here's the one we want to talk to tonight about that.
Yeah.
So, moving on. So we want to talk a little bit more about Trump's future plans for moving the economy forward, to giving us the ability to finish up. So what's phase 3 look like? And DeSantis, what's that going to be? When do we get that?
If it were up to me, it would have happened yesterday. It would have happened yesterday. So, but getting everybody open and fully back to work is obviously the ultimate goal. And the sooner that happens, the better off the entire country is going to be. Right. So especially considering that the money that people receive from the CARES Act is gone. It's gone. So the money that hasn't been dispersed yet, I mean, it's earmarked for people to go out. Some of it hasn't gone out yet, but people who have received that check, they used it to pay their rent, they used to pay their mortgage, or they used to buy groceries, they used to pay their utility bills. The payroll protection plan, I know they're trying to tweak that a little bit with subsequent legislation allowing businesses more time to be able to spend that money, because they're not only having to get past local regulations that are preventing them from opening, but they've also got to get all these people, their employees, back in the door. Right. And so you want to get everybody back on payroll, but if you do it at a rate that's faster than what the state is allowing you to do it, then you end up running afoul of your state legislature. And then you're saying, okay, well, if I only open at 25%, I bring all these people back in, the state comes and shuts me down. I'm now closed for another month or 2 months while I figure that out. Meanwhile, the money for my payroll protection plan has expired. I can't use it anymore. And has it really helped the business? Right. So the idea about phase 3 or maybe even a phase 4, it needs to be phase, let's open. Right.
There you go.
Phase open. Let's stop calling winners and losers, and let's just do phase open.
Yes. All right. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We have a few announcements. We got some. I
hope everybody had a chance to watch the launch. That was fun, right?
Yes.
So that was cool. I think, what was it, 2011 was the last time a rocket went up? I think it was 2011 when the shuttle program finally ended. So
with people,
right. So obviously I was here when the shuttle program was going full steam all through the 90s and obviously the 2000s. And when the program ended, watching all of those engineers and other NASA jobs just evaporate was a pretty nasty blow to the local economy. So I am really like rooting for Elon, and I'm rooting for these private companies to get NASA up and running again, because you're talking about an insane amount of good upper middle class engineering, white collar and blue collar jobs that are going to employ not only Brevard County, but that stuff trickles into businesses for the neighboring counties too. So, Indian River, Orange, Osceola. Osceola's moving big tech too. I know Orange has Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. So, all of these big tech companies that are going to be able to compete for contracts with these private companies and helping to support, apparently our Mars mission. It's only going to be great for the economy. So we're really looking forward to that. I was really excited about the launch.
Yes, I watched it. It was such a fast rocket. I watched, okay. 10,
it was kind of underwhelming
9,
in that respect, right?
1, it got down to 1 and started the launch and ran outside. I can't see it. It's too far. It's too small. I go back inside. Oh, they're in space. What the?
Yeah. So my wife made the same comment. She's like, it lasted like 15 seconds. I'm like, well, yeah, it's moving faster than the speed of sound. Yes, it goes fast.
Fantastic. Well, we have a debate coming up.
Yes, we do.
We've sent out RSVP invitations. We can only fit 75 in the room, but we'd be happy if there was a clamoring additional 75 to get in.
So I don't know if we reported this last week, but 3 of the 4 candidates have now committed to being there. So our only holdout is Bill. So hopefully Bill will respond to my invitation. I know he received it, and we'll decide to show up that day, because certainly I think the people in our area deserve to hear what he's got to say, and deserves to see him on the stage next to the other 3 candidates, including me, and start to compare and contrast it. So we're looking forward to that opportunity to be able to get everybody up and have that exchange in an open forum type situation. Obviously, Michael Yaffe moderating that for us, WFLA News Radio host. So we're excited by the exposure that's going to get us. So hopefully everybody will come. Take a minute, go to my website. It's ChristopherWrightForCongress.com. On the events page, there's a way to register. It's going to ask you for a name and email address and how many people are coming. So it's real quick and easy to register, and we hope to see people there.
Yes, we are operating that out of Osceola County, and we do need to abide by Osceola County's rules. There is some special information that we'll have in our next podcast that we didn't quite have time to prepare in this one, concerning some of Osceola County's implementation of arrests and draconian kind of levels of we'll put our thumbs down on people for not wearing a mask. Yeah,
so the more people that register in advance will help us better plan for how we're going to set up the room, where the stage is going to be, where the moderator is going to sit. So please go to the website, register for your seat. And if you take a seat, please come, because if you take a seat, I'm not going to give one to somebody else, because the county is telling us how many people we're allowed to have in the room. So be courteous of other folks who might like to come.
You will be issued Chris Wright for Congress paraphernalia and a sign at entrance, so we can cheer and laud. And it's going to be a good time. It will be very informative. The other candidates are very well spoken, but not the candidates for our district this year as the Republican choice. And then we'll be able to go head-to-head with Darren Soto after the August primary. So we're very excited about that. We thank you all for joining tonight, and we'll catch you again next week. Wednesday.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Have a good evening. America's on the brink of economic collapse. People are out of work, and we're spending money faster than we can take it in. Liberal policies are going to bankrupt this country. The problem is, Democrats will tax your businesses to death, killing jobs and costing people wages, forcing people to dip into their retirement and savings to be able to make ends meet. It's the exact opposite of what we need right now. The way forward is to stay focused on small business, keep taxes low across the board, get rid of job-killing regulations and red tape, promote investment. That's how we empower people to dream big. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat. It doesn't matter if you're an independent. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican. Now is the time to reinvest in America through conservative leadership. What we need is the right approach. I'm Chris Wright, candidate for Congress in Florida's 9th District, and I approve this message.